Hi, you're watching Hindustan Times. I'm Aditi Prasad. The BJP had swept Western Uttar Pradesh in 2017 assembly polls. They had pocketed nearly 50% of the Jat votes in the region. They had won, if I remember correctly, 91 out of the 113 seats. Now, this time around, the scenario is changed. There's the farmers' agitation, the anger, so to speak. There is combined with the formidable Samajwadi Party RLD alliance that has probably changed the groundswell in the region. The last several days, we've seen the BJP bolster its campaign in the region with Union Home Minister Amit Shah leading from the front. He started his poll yatra, his poll campaigning from Kerala, so today we want to discuss and decode what exactly is happening in Western Uttar Pradesh, which is barely 6 days away from the first phase of polling in Uttar Pradesh. I have with me Hindustan Times editor-in-chief Sukumar Ranganathan to decode the poll battle in Western Uttar Pradesh. Sukumar, how do you see the Western UP poll arithmetic as on date? The BJP had swept the region last time. Do you believe them to be on a stickier wicket this time around?
Not just last time. It's important to remember that the BJP swept this in
Yes.
20 Lok Sabha, 2017 Assembly, and then again 2019 Lok Sabha. So for three successive elections, this has been a stronghold of the BJP. It's also important to remember why this happened and how this was achieved. Um, and it goes back to 2013 when there were communal riots in Western Uttar Pradesh. Many of the people uh, there, the Jats, blamed the Samajwadi Party for what happened during the riots. Significant polarization happened, and the vote in that region, which used to be a farmer vote, became like much of the vote in UP, a Hindu Muslim vote, right? I mean, it got
Right.
broken into. And much like in other parts of the state, the BJP was able to successfully consolidate the Hindu vote, and that helped it in that region. The question you're now asking is can be asked in many different ways, but the simplest way of asking it is: are people going to continue to vote as farmers, or is their religious identity uh, going to trump their uh, identity as farmers? And it's a tough question to answer. It's a tough question to answer simply because if you had asked this question in November, the answer would have been different, because the answer then would have been farm anger, right? The protests that happened, they lasted for 14 months. A lot of farmers from Western Uttar Pradesh were part of the protests, were very, very anti BJP at that point in time. Sitting BJP legislators from the region feared that they would even be unable to enter many villages to campaign. But then the farm laws were repealed. And clearly, one of the reasons why the farm laws were repealed was because of the polls in Uttar Pradesh. Now, with the repeal of the farm laws, and the Prime Minister went in front, took ownership, repealed it himself, uh, has the BJP clawed back lost ground, right? I mean, as it regained lost ground, and our field reporting seems to suggest that in part it has, and that in part it hasn't. So, which is a classic dilemma in the minds of the farmers of Western Uttar Pradesh. Do they vote as farmers, or do they vote for a party which they've supported in 2014, 2017, and 2019 as part of the Hindu vote? Um, do they vote as Hindus? And that is really a big challenge in Western Uttar Pradesh.
Hmm.
Important to also look at the alliance that has been formed between the Samajwadi Party and the RLD. The RLD strong in the region, clearly. I mean, Chaudhry Charan Singh's party, grandson is now in charge of the party, and uh, but even there, a lot of people are saying that some of the candidates that have been put up are SP candidates who are standing on RLD ticket. So clearly there's a little bit of angst related to that, but it's not going to be as easy for the BJP as it was in 14, 17, and 19. But at the same time, it's not going to be a cakewalk for the RLD and the SP combined. So it's going to be a very, very interesting election, of course, all across Uttar Pradesh, but especially so in Western Uttar Pradesh.
You talked about, interestingly, about this whole polarization of votes that might happen, and what will they vote with their religious identity, and or will the voting happen with their farmer identity or their Jat identity. Now, very interestingly, over the last 2 3 days specifically, we've seen this polarization aspect come up in the campaigning. There is an Amit Shah who goes and talks about Bajrang Bali. There are SP people, SP candidate from Meerut. He went and started talking about Hindu Gardi and all of that. That polarization. Do you see that polarization as a result of the political leaders, netas, also reading the situation on the ground and trying to get their votes intact, because they are seeing that the farmer anger may have gone down, so now they are appealing to religious identity to sort of get more votes towards their side, whichever side of the spectrum they may be on.
I think we make too much of polarization in these elections. And the reason we make too much of polarizations in these elections is simply because, Aditi, it's a given, right?
Yeah.
It's there. It's like repeatedly stating a truism. So the fact is, every political party which is out there, which is trying to get people to vote on the basis of their identity, whether it is their religious identity or whether it's their caste identity, is in effect trying to consolidate a vote by an identity group, and that is the very definition of polarization. It
Hmm.
is unfortunate that Uttar Pradesh circa 2022 is still voting on the basis of this, but this is what we've come to expect. So I think we spend too much time talking about polarization because it is a given. I think we should just accept it and move on. It will be nice if it is not there. It will be nice if people are voting
Hmm.
for issues related to healthcare and education and environment and industry and their own personal aspirations. Uh, but that doesn't seem to be happening. Strangely enough, UP is the youngest state in the country. Uh, Irrespective of whatever narrative which is being put out, we know that the industry is not particularly developed there. It might have shown the most incremental progress over the last 5 years, but if you look at it in absolute terms, the developmental indicators of Uttar Pradesh are pretty bad, right? I mean, there's no other way of putting it. It's a world of difference between where UP is and where the rest of the country is. And even when you look at education, most of the young people from Uttar Pradesh end up studying humanities and then struggle to find jobs. It's also a problem in Bihar. We've written about this. Whereas if you look
Right.
at many of the southern states which are more developed, most of the people end up studying either vocational courses or science or engineering or medicine or something like that, and land up in easier for them to get jobs. Humanities jobs, what jobs are you going to get, right? So I just think it'd be nice if people talk about developmental issues, but unfortunately, identity is what seems to drive the election in Uttar Pradesh. So we the other day someone was reading something that our newsroom had put out and asked me, why are you guys breaking it up, by caste? And the simple
Hmm.
answer to this question is, this is how people vote. I mean, I'd love to
Right.
not be in a position where we have to do this, but this is how we have to do. So you have to look at the OBC vote, you'll have to look at the SC vote, and that is something that we should talk about, right? I mean, what happens to Mayawati and what happens to the Bahujan Samaj Party? Is there going to be some change there that you're going to see? So I don't think it's really development that is really going to decide where this election goes. I think it's going to be, how do the OBCs vote, how do the SCs vote, to what extent does the BJP manage to retain the consolidated Hindu vote that it created. And the peak of this was probably in 2019 when it landed up with 50% of the vote share. Of course, the fact that it also landed up with 50% of the vote share was because there was a partnership between the SP and the BSP in 2019. But
Hmm.
landed up with 50% of the vote share. Now, 50% indicates a significant level of consolidation. Do you manage to retain
Right.
that level of consolidation? or are you going to see a break in that, especially given the fact that there has been a lot of movement of OBC leaders out of the BJP?
BJP. And it's sad that and as you pointed out, it's sad that we're still talking about caste breakdown of votes even in 2022. But having said that, and it's a reality of Indian politics which you can't just do away with. You talked about the Jat votes. Let's talk about the Akhilesh Yadav and the RLD factor and their formidable. How formidable is this alliance in your opinion? And because it's the Jat vote disenchantment with the BJP cannot simply be because of the farmer protest of the Jat vote, because it's also the power equation in Lucknow, which they feel that they were not a part of. The sugarcane policy of the UP government, all of that. How much of that do you think is going to play out in the days to come?
It, to what level is there resentment against the union government? Because the Jats have a long pending demand saying we want to be recognized as a central OBC. They're recognized as an
Right.
OBC in Pradesh, not recognized as a central OBC, right? Uh, to what extent is there going to be Jat angst against um, farm issues, including cane dues, right? Sugar cane
Yeah.
dues. Uh,
Yeah.
so which again brings us to the fundamental question: are they going to vote as farmers? Are they going to, or are they going to vote as um, Hindus who since 2014 consistently supported the BJP? And that is the question that we'll have to answer. Sure, you mentioned these issues related to cane, and we've discussed the issue related to Judge being named a central OBC, which is a long-standing demand which the union government hasn't listened to. Um,
Right.
they've promised to again, right? I mean, there have been over the last few weeks, there have been outreach. There's been an outreach to the Jats, and they've been told that we will look at this favorably. But um, I don't know, right? And I don't think many of the farmers themselves know which way they are voting yet.
Hmm.
It's something that will probably emerge over the next 10 days. You asked about the alliance. On paper, it's a strong alliance, right? And on paper, at least right until now, there doesn't seem to be any sort of friction between the alliance partners, between the SP and the RLD. I mean, there are other parties with whom the SP seems to have some other problems, but these two doesn't really seem to be an issue. Uh, but is that really going to mean people will vote differently than they've done in the last three elections?
Uh, that is a very
So,
valid
just,
point,
just,
Sukumar. That your
just
point.
sorry, just to conclude, uh,
Yeah.
I, I know that this is a different RLD because it's headed by Jayant and everything else. But over the last um many years, this is not a party that has shown itself to be a paragon of stability when it comes to choice of partners,
Hmm.
right? I mean,
Absolutely.
they've been quite flexible for what.
Absolutely. In fact, we've seen, that's what we saw in Bihar, and that's the Bihar election is probably the parallel that I'd like to draw with. There was such a groundswell for Tejasvi Yadav. In optics, it seemed that Tejasvi Yadav was getting, going to, take that mantle away from Nitish Kumar. But in reality, it didn't really fructify into votes on the ground to that extent that one was expecting. Do you feel that because in UP also in optics, Akhilesh Yadav seems to be sort of getting very good optics. Optically, he seems to be out there. He seems to be getting a groundswell. What is your sense from what you hear from the ground from our reporters, our HT reporters on the ground? What are they saying? Does this groundswell look like the one that will translate into votes on the ground? And as you're pointing out, the entire Jat sweep that the BJP had earlier, will that entire Jat sweep come to this side? I mean, what are our ground reports telling us, sir?
See, there are two or three imponderables that people tend to leave out of any election analysis before the results, right? And then after the results, everyone focuses on those. One of those is the level to which you uh, your machinery is really good in managing the election, getting people out to vote, making sure that your supporters come out in enough numbers, and making sure that at every booth you have someone responsible who is ensuring that all the people whom you know will vote for you get to land up there and cast their vote. And I think at that ground level where you need um, and what can I say, a very effective kind of machinery. I think the BJP may have an edge in Uttar Pradesh, and I just think that we somehow tend to overlook this. A lot of analysts overlook this in West Bengal, where clearly this was an advantage for the TMC. So this is one of the things that we are picking up, right? Which is the level of um, or the effectiveness of the ground level machinery of the party. And what we are picking up is clearly that since 2014, the BJP has worked hard to improve this machinery. So that is something that it's not glamorous, right? Because we are not talking about arithmetic, we are not talking about identity, we are not talking about any. This is a bread and butter kind of approach to elections, but it is not something that can be ignored. The second thing we are picking up is that uh, in some parts of the state, the initial belief was that the absence of rallies would actually hurt the BJP. But uh, there seems to be now some indication that will probably also hurt the SP. The fact that there seemed to be not a groundswell but a little bit of momentum which was with them uh, doesn't seem to be there anymore, right? Because I just think all parties are operating with these constraints, and clearly the BJP has far more strong leaders with um, some kind of cadence in Uttar Pradesh, right? You have Rajnath Singh, you have Amit Shah, you have the Chief Minister himself, you have JP Nadda, and these are all
Right.
people. And then of course you have the Trump card, right? You have the Prime Minister, and these are all people uh, who have a lot of cadence. SP doesn't have enough leaders with that level of cadence, right? I mean, I don't think Mulayam Singh Yadav is out there campaigning simply because I'm not sure that he's well enough to be campaigning. Of course, Akhilesh is there and he's running a reasonably energetic campaign. But if you were to look at the fact that even the Home Minister Amit Shah is doing door-to-door campaigning, uh, does mean that the BJP is really going at it. And so I think uh, that too is going to matter, especially in parts of the state like Western Uttar Pradesh, where our understanding is that a lot of voters are still undecided on how they will vote. Are they going to vote on the basis of um, uh, 8-year loyalty that they've built up to a particular party, or are they going to vote on the basis of 14 months of unhappiness that that same party made them face? We
Hmm.
don't know. So this campaign matters when it comes to that.
And this campaign actually is the way that the BJP election juggernaut actually works. Unlike other parties, where the kind of planning that the BJP puts into winning every, I mean, actually going down at the booth level is something that probably other parties. I'm sure many of them have already picked it up because this is a very trademark BJP sort of every vote matters and going to every person and talking to every person and that kind of from the building, having that network on the ground and then taking it forward. And that is what Sukumar is saying that the BJP is now doing in Uttar Pradesh because they obviously are considering this as the semi-final to 2024, which it is. Sukumar, would you agree with that assessment?
Completely. I mean, it is the most important state in the country. It's all well for us to say, oh, people vote differently when it comes to state elections and national elections to some extent. But if the party that wins Uttar Pradesh, the state elections right now, if definitely going to go into 2024 saying that we have a clear advantage, and
And
that is what makes it so important, beyond the personalities of it, right? I mean, I just think, um, if the BJP retains Uttar Pradesh, it's like a big shot in the arm for the party. Uh, if the Samajwadi Party springs a surprise, then it's a huge boost for the opposition. And that is really what is at stake. Uh, it may not influence the eventual outcome of 2024, but the setting of the stage is going to be very different depending on which party wins.
right, the sentiment and the setting of the stage and the ground level buoyancy of the karyakartas of whichever party wins will be absolutely different. And of course, let's not forget that UP does send 80 MPs to the Lok Sabha. Thank you so much for this information and your insights into the Western UP. Uh, what would you call the Western UP battleground, so to speak. And thank you so much, viewers, for watching this broadcast. We will come back to you next Friday at 11:30 a.m. Stay tuned.
Thank you, Aditi.